My name is Joseph Greenwell. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I have the wonderful opportunity of partnering with students, faculty, and staff here at Columbia University as the Vice President for Student Affairs and University Life. I just want to welcome you to this situational awareness training. But before I turn it over to our trainers for today, I'd like to share my gratitude. First and foremost, I want to thank all the students that are on this Zoom. I've had many of students reach out to me in advocacy for resources such as the one that is you're about to participate in, and some of which I see in the room right here as well. And so I just want to give gratitude, to really supporting your community, supporting the entire Columbia community. And these are very important skills for all of us. That what triggered this particular training was the increase that we're seeing around hate and violence, particularly toward the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. But these are skills that everyone can benefit from, and not just students. This was also open up to faculty and staff. So thank you for everything in your partnership in making today happen. I'd also like to thank Public Safety and their team for pulling this together quickly on behalf of students in the community. And specifically, I'd like to thank Chief McShane, Albert Becker, Matthew Childress, and also Jimmy Lai, and who will be presenting with you today. And last but not least, by any means, is the person I get to partner with daily, is Caroline Hirsch, who put all of the logistics together in order for us to host this event. So with no further ado, Matthew, I'd like to turn it over to you to start the training, and thank you again.
Thank you, Joseph, for your opening remarks. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of James McShane, Vice President for Public Safety, and Joseph Greenwell, Vice President for Student Affairs, I would like to welcome you all today to the Situational Awareness Training section. We would like to express our support of our student, faculty, and staff, and specifically the Asian American, and Pacific Islander communities. We condemn all acts of hate and violence perpetrated against our community, and we stand together in solidarity to promote an equitable and inclusive campus culture that is safe and free of fear. The safety and wellness of the community is our highest priority, and we hope that this training will provide you with the skills, techniques, and resources to navigate uncomfortable, hazardous, or life-threatening situations. Again, my name is Matt Childress. I'm the Assistant Director of Training and Development at Public Safety. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I do have with me Jimmy Lai. He's our Assistant Director of Admin and Planning. He may be jumping off here shortly, but I just want to acknowledge him and his contribution to this presentation. As far as what's on the agenda today, a little bit about myself. I've been with Columbia since 2009. I graduated in 2012 with a degree in poli-sci and finance. I've been with public safety since 2013. Been in this field, specifically emergency management, training and development for over the past 20 years. I do have some subject matter expertise in these topics. I'm also a certified master instructor with the New York State's Department of Criminal Justice Services. And these training sessions are very important to me. We like to be able to get out to the community and get everyone the best sort of training in regards to these topics. It's very important. So our agenda today is why situational awareness. We'll talk about planning and preparation. I'll go over the process of conducting a risk assessment and the various resources that we have at our disposal. I'll touch on the fight-or-flight response and go over developing awareness and those techniques that are involved in situational awareness. I will talk about run, hide, fight, and we'll watch a video pertaining to active threat, active shooter. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A. So the goals of this training is for everyone to walk out understanding what the importance of personal safety planning and preparation is, understand how to conduct a personal risk assessment, be familiar with the resources at our disposal, and develop skills and techniques that will allow us to have a 360-degree level of awareness. And I'll go into more in depth about what that means, 360-degree level of awareness. I will have to say that here's my trigger warning, and throughout the presentation, when we get to moments where we'll touch on sensitive topics that might induce stress, I will give a fair warning and allow you all the opportunity to stretch your legs, take a walk if something that we touch on might induce, if that induces a little bit of stress or anxiety. By all means, feel free to step outside at any time. So situational awareness is defined as being aware of what is happening around you in terms of where you are, where you're supposed to be, and whether anyone or anything around you is a threat to your health or safety. But why situational awareness? Well, personal safety awareness does not begin and end at school or the workplace. It's omnipresence. It's 24/7, 365. Being aware of our surroundings allows us time to react to life-threatening or uncomfortable situations. Part of situational awareness is the planning and preparation, developing an internal survival playbook, having a response to whatever life-threatening or hazardous variable you may or may not be subjected to. You'll hear this often, the what if, the hypothetical. When you plan and prepare for these events, the likelihood of you navigating successfully these events increases dramatically. But think about this. What steps do you already take in your planning and preparation process? Oftentimes, we disregard personal safety planning and we focus more on the now, right? The purchases that we make, the travel, the informed decisions that we make when we actually have to come off a dollar or two. But think about this. What steps do you take when you make a large purchase in your life, when you plan for a trip? The template that we're going to talk about, the personal risk assessment template that I'll lay out for you, is scalable. You can adapt that to whatever event, whatever situation you might encounter in life. And the benefits of planning and preparation, we're more productive. We have greater achievement. We make better decisions. It's a proactive, not a reactive process. Less anxiety. I think that right there is one of the more important ones. It helps alleviate or relieve anxiety, and it also gives us a sense of empowerment. When we plan and prepare and we achieve our goals, we charted a course, we followed the plan, and we had a successful outcome. So when I talk about laying out the foundation for a personal risk assessment, I like to use a mnemonic, I am. Identify, information, assessment, manage. Identify, what is the threat? Information, what do you know about the threat? Assessment, is that threat real or is it not? Manage, how would I respond to that threat? And you're going to hear this repeated over and over within this presentation because what gets repeated gets remembered. The more you think about it, the more it goes from your conscious to your subconscious. And when those moments come where we actually have to implement these plans, it's just muscle reflex now. It's part of our procedure. So what are the threats? Here, the National Safety Council has the odds. Like, what are the odds of us dying from heart disease? Well, 1 in 6 Americans will die in heart disease. Cancer, 1 in 7 Americans will die of cancer. As you can see, the things that we actually have control over are more likely to harm us versus the things that we don't have much control over. If you look at the last bullet here, terrorist attack, 1 in 50 million Americans will lose their life in a terrorist attack. So the odds are in our favor. But at the end of the day, we have to still plan and prepare for that what if scenario, that hypothetical. What if I found myself confronting this particular event? So all these threats are variables. I could tell you to exercise 3 times a week, get 30 minutes of exercise, watch what you eat, and that might actually have more of an impact than saying, well, you know what, the likelihood of you having exposure to a terrorist attack is 1 in 50 million. At the end of the day, we have to take all these threats, all these variables seriously, and we have to plan and account for them. And when we conduct our personal risk assessment, identify, information, assessment, manage, you'll see how you can build that that could be a template to handle any potentially hazardous or life-threatening situation that you might encounter. So part of the process is gathering information. So the previous slide, it's valid point, even though the odds are in our favor, unfortunate events still occur, and therefore we must plan and prepare for those what-if situations. Newspapers are a source of information, albeit from criminal activity to hazardous weather conditions. But what other sources of information do we have at our disposal? How we respond to life-threatening hazardous situation And if we can navigate those situations successfully, it has a lot to do with the information, like what do we actually know about the threat? And how can I navigate around those threats? Where else can you find information? Well, here at Columbia, our public safety website is a great resource. That access gives you the annual security report, various clear alerts from all three campuses here in Manhattan, all the services that are provided to the community via public safety, also crime prevention tips and training, various emergency response protocols. So if you go onto our website and if you go onto emergency response protocols, you'll see that those protocols exist for Morningside, Manhattanville, and at the medical center. And it gives you a great guidance on how to respond to various hazardous events, everything from a lab safety issue to an active shooter issue. Also, there's a community segment within our website where you can request training sessions such as the situational awareness training. Or if you have any questions or comments or feedback, then you can access that website and give that feedback to us directly. And our website is publicsafety.columbia.edu. One of the new initiatives that is pretty recent to the department within the past year, we've had, we brought online the LionSafe app. It's free to the community. You can get this via the Apple Store or Google Play. It gives you all the emergency response protocols. It gives you direct contact with the various campus operations desks here for public safety, the various services that emergency response services that the university provides, gives you campus maps, gives you schedules for the intercampus bus, for our rideshare program. And also it has this other function called Friend Walk, which I'll get into a little bit more in the next slide. So this feature of the LionSafe app is incredibly useful and very relevant to what we're talking about today. If you find yourself working late at night or you're studying late into the morning and you're leaving campus, you're leaving your workspace, but you're leaving alone, you can access the LionSafe app and utilize the Friend Walk feature. And in real time, you can share your location with a friend and they can watch you walk to your destination. The benefit is that they'll watch you and they can trigger a call to emergency services if necessary. It is a very useful feature of the application, and this is yet another tool that we have at our disposal, and it's a great resource for the community. I would strongly encourage everyone, when you have the time, to visit the App Store, Google Play or Apple, and download the app for free. Other resources, we're online, we're on social media. If you have the time, like us on Facebook. We also post a lot of information, public safety related information on our social media sites. We're both on Facebook and Instagram. As far as our presence in the community, we have emergency call box throughout the Morningside, Manhattanville, and Medical Center campuses. Those emergency call boxes give you direct access to our operations desk in case of an emergency. And it's a great way to get us out there immediately to be able to interact with you and get you this kind of service that you need. We have security booths strategically located throughout the community. Those are often manned by our public safety personnel 24/7, 365 days out of the year. We also have foot and vehicle patrols throughout our communities. We have a strong public safety presence. We also, in the warm weather months, you'll see more and more of us out there on bicycle, patrolling the neighborhoods. And we also have the VIA rideshare program, which I'll get into here in a second. So this was recently brought online, our OnDemand Transportation. We partnered with Columbia Transportation, and this provides on-demand transportation service as an alternative to walking alone at night. Using the VIA app is the easiest, most effective way to get a ride. But if you cannot use the VIA app, by all means, give us a call. Whether you're at Morningside, Manhattanville, or at the medical center, and public safety can provide you some transportation if need be. So if you're interested in more information regarding our on-demand transportation services, you can visit the transportation.columbia.edu, the Columbia Transportation site, and you can get more information regarding our rideshare program. Also, you have other modes of transportation at your disposal online or via the apps. You have the Lyft, you have Uber, and obviously the MTA is another service to get around town. Other resource available online, you can visit the New York City Police Department website. Obviously, you can call 911 in case of emergency. On their webpage, you have access to the various precincts that cover our Columbia communities. Just as an example, the 24th and 26th Police Precinct covers Morningside and Manhattanville. The 33rd and 34th Precinct covers the Medical Center. You can also have access to crime maps, where you can look at what's going on in and around the Columbia community or where you live. And also, part of our planning and preparation when you travel abroad, what kind of emergency notifications, what kind of planning, what kind of information do you share with your loved ones? As a personal note, I like to travel, and whenever I go abroad, I make sure that I get the information of the local hospitals or local police stations programmed into my phone, because you never know if one of those what if situations just pops up. You're gonna, what's the old saying? It's better to need and not have than have and not need. A lot of this planning and preparation can help relieve anxiety when you're in that moment abroad where you need emergency response. Also, if you're traveling abroad, it's good practice to identify the location of the local embassy or the consulate, because they're the ones you'll be reaching out to directly if you need assistance from the US government. As far as researching international travel, as far as alerts or travel advisories, the State Department has a really good travel site, travel.state.gov. Very informative. It's my go-to whenever I travel abroad. It gives me updates pretty much within the past few days of what's going on in those areas I'm looking to visit. All right. So we're going to dive right into learning how to conduct a personal risk assessment. And I'm going to use this video. This is a clip from the movie The Bourne Identity. Give you a little background of what's going on. Jason Bourne, portrayed by Matt Damon, has his companion. He and his companion are in a bar. Matt Damon is suffering, or Jason Bourne is suffering from trauma-induced amnesia. He doesn't know why he knows the things that he knows, but he just knows them, and he's asking that question. So here's an example of what situational awareness looks like in practice.
I come in here, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm catching the sight lines and looking for an exit.
I see the exit sign too. I'm not worried. I mean, you were shot. People do all kinds of weird and amazing stuff when they're scared.
I can tell you the license plate numbers of all 6 cars outside. I can tell you that our waitress is left-handed and the guy sitting up at the counter weighs 215 pounds and knows how to handle himself. I know the best place to look for a gun is the cab of the gray truck outside. And at this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking. Now, why would I know that? How can I know that and not know who I am?
Well, after this training, you'll be able to have a good conversation with Jason Bourne and explain to him exactly why he is able to recall some of this information. The training and experience that led up to that moment where he was subjected to that trauma, right before his amnesia, all that training, that repetition, basically, survival training, situational awareness training, identifying the threats, determining whether the threats are real or not, having a quick assessment and the ability to manage or have a plan to manage through these incidents should they arise. So this is a very good example of what gets repeated gets remembered. The more you visualize these what ifs, these hypotheticals, the more you put yourself in those scenarios, the more the likelihood is that if you actually have to confront a situation, one of these hypotheticals, you'll be able to successfully navigate through one of those what if situations. So part of good situational awareness is creating a baseline. So this is what Jason Bourne does, right? He enters into an environment and he tries to determine what's normal for the environment in which he's in. And we can do this regardless whether we're in class, whether we're at home, traveling from home to the subway. Understanding what is the normal allows you to key on any deviations from the baseline. So when I say what's normal for your environment, what's the noise, what's the smell, the lighting, movement, the mood, because any sudden deviation from the norm will alert you to a potential threat or a hazard. Creating a baseline is very important. And to put this in context, think about this. For y'all in the audience for y'all who are with us today, think of, especially if you have children. For a parent, what does it mean when you have children in the home? But what does it mean when you have children in the home and all of a sudden the house goes silent? Does that cue you into, well, maybe something's going on. Maybe there's something I have to investigate. That's the context. Or a lifeguard at the pool. What is normal for a lifeguard's environment? Laughing, joking, splashing, play, music. When things deviate from that norm, it immediately cues the lifeguard to respond to a what if. What if the screaming and the crying is associated with someone drowning? In the office space, what's normal in your office space, your workspace? Anything over a shout, does that raise concern? Loud banging, loud shouting, would that alert you to a deviation to the baseline? But what would you do when you have a deviation from the baseline? Well, first of all, we have to identify what the threat is. What do we know about it? The assessment. Is it real or is it not? And one of the resources here at Columbia that we all have at our disposal is public safety. If you are in a situation where you don't feel quite right, something's deviated from that baseline, it's easy to make a call, letting public safety know, oh, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is what I'm observing, and this is what I need. Public safety would be dispatched to your location, and they can verify whether or not there is a threat, whether it's real or if it's not. But it's good practice, just as a best practice, just get used to identifying what is the normal in each environment that you're in. From my own personal experience, I'm from Virginia. And when I first moved to New York City, I had to get reacclimated to how things work. I had a car in Virginia. If I needed to go somewhere, I got in my vehicle and I traveled to my destination. I didn't have to interact with many people. When I moved to New York City, I really had to get this through my mind. From the hours of 8 to 9, riding the subway, I'm going to be slam packed right next to someone else. I used to be very funny about having people within my personal space, but the baseline, the normal for that particular environment, for that particular time, that was the reality. So knowing that this was something I would have to encounter every day during my morning commute helps alleviate a lot of my anxiety. And then I can focus on like true deviations from the norm, right? Just as an example. All right, so I would like to test you all.
Here's your challenge. How many people in orange shirts get subs? Go. Seven people in orange shirts got subs. But what else did you see? Did you notice the ice cream truck change to a pizza truck? Did you notice the glasses? What about the man leaving the suspicious package next to the truck? Your next challenge, be aware of your surroundings. If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
Now, I apologize, I tricked y'all. This was kind of a curveball. The instructions were to focus in on folks in orange t-shirts getting subs. What happens is when I give you a task like that, because we're all A+ folks here at Columbia, right? We're all gold star overachievers. We wanted to make sure that we got that count accurate and 100%. But when we focus intently on what we've been directed to observe, oftentimes we get tunnel vision. And we focus on the task at hand and we miss what's happening in the background and we miss what's happening in the foreground. So one of the techniques that we're going to discuss later on is how to scan, how to break that tunnel vision. Now, with this in mind, I'm going to replay this one more time and see if you can catch those little deviations of the norm. Is it normal for people to leave bags unattended in New York City? Is that a common occurrence? And if it's not, what could that unattended bag communicate? What could that mean? Well, we don't know if it's an actual threat because I'm not a bomb technician. I'm truthfully not going to open up the bag and look for myself. I have a resource at my disposal. And we hear this all the time, especially on the trains. If you see something, say something. First responders know what it means to have an unattended bag, especially given certain conditions, right? So watch this video one more time and see if you can pick up what's happening in the background and what's happening in the foreground. Use your peripheral vision to watch those in orange t-shirts getting subs. And you'll find that you'll be able to accurately count that activity and also pick up what's happening in the foreground and the background. So just one more time. Now you know what to look for. Scan, break the tunnel vision, and then you'll be able to see the full picture.
Here's your challenge. How many people in orange shirts get subs? Go. Seven people in orange shirts got subs. But what else did you see? Did you notice the ice cream truck change to a pizza truck? Did you notice the glasses? What about the man leaving the suspicious package next to the truck? Your next challenge, be aware of your surroundings. If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
All right. So given a second view, can we all agree that we did just a little bit better? We're able to pick up these subtle deviations of what was the norm. The big changes like the ice cream truck turning into a pizza truck, the glasses, and the unattended bag. So when you take a few steps back, use your peripheral vision, all your senses, you can pick up what's happening both in the background and the foreground. And you get more of a complete picture of what's happening in your environment. So here's some news headlines. Terror attack kills 8, injures 11 in Manhattan. Pipe bomb attack hits New York City subway. Fire at nightclub. 100 dead in fire ignited by band at Rhode Island club. FBI treats Minnesota mall stabbing attack as potential act of terrorism. Man arrested for Times Square bomb attempt. Now, a lot of what gets reported in the media is sensational and it is fear-inducing. But when you take things one step at a time, when you process the information, especially if you're in that what if situation, going through that personal risk assessment will help you navigate that incident more effectively. And I want to key on this last news headline: man arrested for Times Square bomb attempt. And this really drives home the point. If you see something, say something. On May 1st, 2010, 2 vendors observed smoke coming from a parked SUV at the intersection of 45th Street and Broadway near the entrance of the Mishkoff Theater. This is where the Lion King is shown. They immediately reported it to the NYPD and the police quickly evacuated the area. So in context of what we're talking about, what's the norm for their environment? Well, 2 vendors who work that area all the time, aware of the noise, the smells, the daily flow of activity. The deviation from the norm is when they observed a parked SUV smoldering, starting to become engulfed in smoke. The mantra, if you see something, say something, resonated, and they immediately reported this to the NYPD, and the police were able to quickly evacuate the area. So the heroes for this were the actual vendors who were attuned to their surroundings. They were aware that this is not something that is normal. This is actually an occurrence that has just deviated from the baseline. That's not a normal condition for that environment. And they reported it to the NYPD. In actuality, it was a real car bomb and could have definitely had a mass casualty incident. But these 2 vendors, because they saw something and they said something, they were able to prevent a mass casualty incident. So this is a very good example of what it means if you say something, if you see something, say something. So now I'm going to touch on the fight or flight response, and this is all very relevant to good situational awareness. Is we really have to be aware of how our bodies respond to stressful stimuli, especially stimuli that we perceive to be hazardous or potentially life-threatening. The fight or flight response is evolutionary. We can thank our ancestors for it. This is why we have the kind of anxiety that we have. When we fail to plan and prepare for a test, we studied the night before, the outcome might not be what we want. And oftentimes that could have been avoided if we would have planned and prepared for the event rather than wait last minute. In the same context for personal safety planning, the fight or flight response is something that actually can help us. It motivates us to move, or it motivates us to either fight what is threatening or run from what is threatening. Not being aware of how your body responds to threatening stimuli can also cause you to freeze in your tracks. So the visualization, the hypotheticals, the what if situations that you might be exposed to, having a game plan, having a laid out protocol process to navigate those situations will help you, especially when it comes to the real deal. Like if you are subjected to a threat, a hazardous or life-threatening situation, you'd be able to navigate successfully through, and you won't be paralyzed by fear. So what is the fight or flight response? Well, it's an acute stress response. It's a physiological biochemical reaction, occurs in response to a perceived harmful event, attack, or threat to our survival. It's managed by the autonomic nervous system. So this is the unconscious part of our minds. We have no control over it. So what happens is when your mind perceives threatening stimuli, neurotransmitters, epinephrine, norepinephrine cascades into the body, and you have immediate physiological reaction. It prepares you to either run from what is threatening or fight what is threatening. So physiologically, what happens, you'll have an increased heart rate, respiration, and you'll have a pupillary response. This is the tunnel vision, because oftentimes we'll focus in on what's threatening. And as we learned with the video where we had to watch those in orange t-shirts get subbed, having tunnel vision is very restrictive when it comes to good situational awareness. How one breaks tunnel vision is by scanning, taking in what's happening in the background, taking in what's happening in front of us, taking the full picture, along with what's happening or what could be potentially threatening to us. Some of the symptoms, some of the response that physical response that you might have is that you might feel uncontrollable shaking, auditory exclusion, loss of hearing, tunnel vision, and definitely an increased anxiety could be experienced if you're subjected to harmful or threatening stimuli. And the process of the fight or flight response is you get the initial input, right? The unconscious mind interprets something that's harmful or threatening. It alarms. It's a cascade of neurotransmitters, adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Your body reacts. Then after you process the event, recovery, and then exhaustion. So that is the cycle of the fight or flight response. But what does it look like in practice? So this video right here is an example of what the fight or flight response looks like when it's effectively deployed. Oh, excuse me. I know this is a quick video, but we're going to watch it a couple more times because I really want to illustrate what's happening here and why the pedestrian is doing the right thing. Like, look at how the pedestrian is walking. Does the pedestrian have any distractions? Are there headphones in, which restricts his ability to hear what's going on in his environment? Is he on his cell phone, distracted, taking his vision out of the equation? Is the pedestrian looking down at his feet? Just watch it one more time. So what's wonderful about the fight or flight response is that our minds are actively scanning for harmful or threatening stimuli. Your body will automatically engage if it perceives a threat to your survival. So as the pedestrian is walking down the street, he doesn't have any distractions. He's not on a cell phone. He's not he's not in his own head. His head is up. His eyes are focused in front. But even though he might not be consciously keyed in on the vehicle coming towards him, the mind is already working through that calculus, that trigonometry, right? So cars travel usually in straight lines. It's a straight road, no curves. The mind is picking up the fact that this car is now listing, is starting to move away from the center of the lane and towards the curb. The mind has already initiated the fight or flight response. And how quickly this fight or flight response is activated, it's faster than you can blink an eye. And think about the time the pedestrian had to react to a life-threatening situation. Excuse me, one more. I actually timed this. It ended up being less than half a second, the time from which we can actually see the car and the pedestrian move out of the way. It happened that fast. So some of the roadblocks to good situational awareness is just being distracted. When you live in New York City, it's a pedestrian town. We walk around to get to where we need to go more often than not, especially if you live in the city. When you're walking on the sidewalk, being distracted can reduce the effectiveness of the fight or flight response. And also it's just a hurdle, a big roadblock for good situational awareness. So my recommendation, when you're commuting, when you're leaving your safe zones, your workspace, when you're leaving your home, have it part of the plan that you don't have your mobile devices up in front of your face. Don't have the earbuds in your ear. Don't be distracted. Have all your senses employed so you benefit from the fight or flight response. Because oftentimes your mind is already scanning for harmful or threatening stimuli. And when you feel that physiological response of an increased heart rate, the tension, that trigger should allow you to focus on, well, okay, so my body's responding this way. My mind has already picked up something that's harmful or threatening. I need to look around. I need to scan. I need to see what's going on. If there's any deviations from that baseline, anything that is out of the ordinary in this particular environment, whether it's that distance between your home and the subway, that distance between Butler and Hamilton, being distracted is going to be a roadblock to good situational awareness. And I use this particular footage as a great example because the outcome was successful. The pedestrian ended up coming out okay and nobody was harmed, but think about what if the pedestrian was distracted, had buried into Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok. Would that afforded the pedestrian enough time to respond to that vehicle? I would venture to say probably not. Well, because he wasn't distracted, his mind created enough time. There was enough time to alert his system to activate the fight or flight response, and he was able to move out of the way of what would potentially kill him. All right. Okay, again, our personal risk assessment. What do we need to know? What is the threat? What do I know about it? Is it real or is it not? And how would I respond? IAM, identify information, assessment, manage. So in the next clip, we're going to talk about street crime. There was a case study in 1981. A paper was actually put out by Professors Grayson and Stein. I think Professor Grayson represented Hofstra, and then Professor Stein was at NYU, but this happened in 1981. They interviewed convicted criminals and asked them to view a film of pedestrians walking down a busy New York City sidewalk. They were seeking to answer the following questions. Are there specific movements or behaviors that identify a potential target of an assault and which single or are perceived as signaling this vulnerability to the perpetrator? If so, can these movements or behaviors be identified? This was their hypothesis. Their hypothesis was there is movements and there are behaviors that signal to a perpetrator a target's vulnerability. So to verify their hypothesis, they went and interviewed those who were convicted for violent crimes in various prisons around the state. The respondents identified within seconds of viewing the film which pedestrians they would likely target. What startled the researchers most was that there was a clear consensus about whom they would have picked as victims, and their choices were not strictly based on sex, race, or age. Based on the input and recommendations given by the respondents, we were able to, Professors Grayson and Stein were able to compile various techniques and strategies to reduce the risk of us being involved in street level crime. Specifically at that time, during the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of muggings occurring in and around New York City. And their research was focused on what was going on at that time. So based on that research, the recommendations provided by the respondents: become a hard target, visualization, scanning, watch your back, make reflective surfaces your ally, stop and pretend, personal space, and intuition. And I'm going to go through each one of these points individually here in just a moment. So what does it mean by being a hard target? Have a plan. Think about those hypothetical what if situations. What happens if somebody approaches you by yourself at night and demands money from you? How would you respond to a situation like that? Well, my recommendation would be path of least resistance, nonviolent confrontations. Give them what they want and they'll leave. These moments might seem like drawn out, long, anguishing moments, but in reality, these kind of encounters happen so quickly. The fact of the matter is by taking the path of least resistance and complying and knowing that, well, you know what, if I'm confronted by myself at night and someone demands that I give up my property, this is how I will respond to it. And the likely outcome is, through the research, is that more often than not, the perpetrator will leave. But don't allow yourself to be distracted. Be confident in your walking about. Those respondents identified those who were distracted. They targeted folks who were in a vulnerable situation, leaving bars by themselves late at night on a subway platform, cutting through back alleys, putting themselves in a disadvantage, not a strategically advantaged situation. Becoming a hard target, put away your cell phone devices, focus on your commute, getting from A to B successfully and safely, and don't be distracted. Here in New York, I had to come to grips with the fact that, my Southern upbringing, I was taught that it was very disrespectful. It was rude even not to acknowledge someone who stopped and asked you for the time. I learned quickly here in New York, it's okay to continue and walk about your business, and you don't have to acknowledge anyone that you don't want to personally interact with. It's okay. And the respondents in the Grayson-Stein study said, actually, that is great advice. You don't have to stop for anybody. If somebody asks you for the time, you can give them the time as you're walking away. Being distracted, looking down at your watch, having to pull out your cell phone to look at your time, that might present an advantageous moment for somebody who's looking to take advantage of you. So when it comes to becoming a hard target, stick to the plan, don't be distracted, and walk it with confidence. This right here is the game changer. This is how we put ourselves in those hypothetical situations, using our minds, visualizing those hypothetical what ifs. What if I'm in this situation? How would I respond? Thinking about how you would navigate those moments, those potentially hazardous or life-threatening situations. Not only get your body attuned as far as how you would respond, your fight or flight response, it minimizes the paralyzing impact of the fight or flight response. Okay, so this is a situation that I'm presented with. I hear something that is out of the ordinary. If I don't have to investigate myself, what do I have at my disposal? Well, I have public safety here at Columbia. I can place a call to them, let them know this is who I am, this is where I am. I hear a noise that's not normal for my environment, and public safety can come and investigate. I don't have to put myself in that harmful situation. Using the power of your mind and visualization is a great way to get practice. Remember what I said, what gets repeated gets remembered. The more often the ability of you putting yourself in those life-threatening, potentially harmful situations and working through your survival playbook, navigating those what if situations effectively, this buys you time, and it makes you more responsive to these threatening situations and better able to navigate them. So take time to visualize yourself in threatening situations, determine how you would react and protect yourself from danger. Scanning, think about this. Where are the exits? Is there anything out of the ordinary? For example, is there anyone acting strangely? Are there any unattended bags in my area? Looking over your shoulder, if you hear something behind you, take a look, verify. Part of your personal risk assessment. You heard a noise coming from behind you. Okay, you identified a potential threat. It's late at night, you're by yourself. You want to verify whether or not that threat is real or not. Looking over your shoulder, information. Okay, so yes, there is something behind me, but if it's just a normal pedestrian going about their business, if you're able to determine that stimuli is not threatening or harmful to you, then you can disregard it and go about your business. But having this part of the normal protocol that you follow helps you. It's just part, it's just practice now. It's just muscle memory. Once it's in your unconscious mind, in those what if hypotheticals, you're able to react and respond effectively. Also with scanning, think about the video that we watched, breaking up that tunnel vision, especially what's happening in the background, what's happening in the foreground. Take the totality, the full picture of what your eyes are bringing in, what information is being inputted. It will give you a better and clearer picture of what's going on. Watch your back. I use the subway as an example. I have a lot of anxiety when I'm on a subway platform. I'm not going to lie to you. Those subway tracks give me a lot of anxiety, and that third rail even more, knowing that that is a fully charged, that's like a lightning bolt, 24/7, 365. That yellow line that we see, that is not an invisible, that right there won't protect you. If you walk past that yellow line, you will fall onto the tracks. And I don't know if you all are aware, but the distance between the platform and the tracks is about 6 feet. So that's a 6-foot fall. One thing to take into consideration, hypothetical, what if you find yourself on the railroad tracks? How would you get out of that situation? Now, 6 feet, that's a distance to overcome, especially if you haven't had any experience or practice using your upper body to pull yourself off the tracks. One thing I found out is that, well, the MTA, when they're doing track work, how they avoid oncoming trains is they walk over to the third rail and they put themselves in between the columns. And that gives you a little safety. If you walk, if you find yourself on the subway tracks, if you walk to the end of the platform, you're going to see a little blue light. Next to that blue light, there is a small set of stairs, and you can actually walk from the tracks up back onto the platform. But if you put your back up against the wall when you're waiting for the train, you eliminate 180 degrees worth of space that you have to worry about. When you put yourself up against the wall, now you can use your peripheral vision, you can scan, and you can more clearly identify threats that are coming your way. Putting yourself up against the wall also eliminates the blind spot and removes the possibility of someone getting behind you. Make reflective surfaces your ally. Test yourself next time you're walking down the street and you see all these storefront, these big glass windows. Look in the window and see if you can see behind you. That's a resource. If you feel somebody is following you, you can use these reflective surfaces to verify whether or not the threat is real. If you're ever in Penn Station, you'll see these reflective mirrors. These are often posted in areas where there are blind corners. Before you turn that corner, look up, look at the mirror, and just verify that there's nothing hazardous around that corner. Stop and pretend. If you feel someone is following you, stop, turn, pretend you went the wrong way. If the person you feel is following continues to follow you, then that verifies that, well, yes, the threat is real. Well, what are your resources when you're in the Columbia area? We partnered with a lot of businesses in the community on all 3 campuses, and they're called safe havens. An easy way to identify a safe haven is look for the red line. So if you see a red line in the window, that is a safe haven. That's refuge. If you feel threatened, if you feel like you're being followed, go into a safe haven. Let the employees know, I'm an affiliate with Columbia. I feel threatened. I need to contact public safety. And they've already received training how to respond to folks who utilize their businesses as safe havens. So that's one great resource. If you still feel, if you're not near a safe haven, but you feel somebody is following you, seek assistance immediately. Call 911. If the person doesn't walk past you and reroutes to follow you, that's the mantra. 911, this is who I am. This is where I am. This is what I'm observing, and this is what I need. And help will be on the way. Take note when somebody invades your personal space. Be mindful of your possessions. Also cue into body language, that nonverbal communication. Often we communicate nonverbally, paraverbally, right? Little of the spoken word is actually, hand gestures, how we express ourselves. Oftentimes we wear emotions on our face, on our sleeves. When it comes to personal space, there's some times during a day where you don't have much control over who is in or around your personal space. I use my morning commute as an example. 8 to 9 in the morning, that's the norm. I'm going to have folks within my personal space. But because I know that that is the norm for that particular environment, I don't have as much anxiety as I used to. When I'm normally interacting with folks, especially if I don't know them, I usually give a 4 to 12 foot distance between myself and the folks that I'm interacting with. But if I'm out and about in the public, if I don't know the person, folks, I'm going to maintain a 12-foot plus distance from those I don't know. So when it comes to personal space, And you might have felt this in your own experiences when somebody encroaches into your even if you know them well. If you don't have a familial, intimate relationship with somebody, when they get between 0 to 1.5 feet, that feeling you have, well, that's your fight or flight response kicking in. That anxiety that you feel, that uneasiness, well, that's your body communicating to you that there's potential threat to your well-being. So you're going to want to pay attention to those feelings. Protect your personal space because, well, not only during the pandemic, 6 feet of social distancing is good for all of us, but also 6 feet is a good range to interact with folks socially. Give it a little bit more space if you're interacting with folks that you don't know, but the benefit of having space between you and others, especially others that you don't know, is it gives you time and distance to be able to either run from the threat, call for assistance, and, well, time is really what it gives you. It gives you time to respond. And if you haven't thought about these hypothetical what ifs, not having a plan laid out, when somebody encroaches into your personal space, you're less likely to respond effectively and in a timely fashion. Trust your gut instinct, trust your fight or flight response, understand that anxiety is part of it. When you have these feelings, verify what's going on in and around your environment that's causing you to feel this way. Don't disregard those feelings, pay attention to them. It's evolutionary, it exists for a reason. You know, those visceral reactions, the situations, when they don't add up, it might signify that there's a threat or there's a danger nearby. So always pay attention to those feelings, trust your intuition. So I have a scenario for you all, and this is something that I'm just going to walk through with y'all. So in this scenario, we're working late into the evening and we decide to take the subway home. We're by ourselves. We don't have anybody that we can walk home with, and it's late at night. Think about the commute, where you are at that particular time. If you're on campus, if you're off campus. In this scenario, you're in your office space. What resources do you have at your disposal to get you from your workspace, your study space, to the train station safely? What resources do you have here at Columbia? You can reach out to public safety. If you're working off campus, you have the VIA rideshare, which is point to point. You might actually have the LionSafe app downloaded on your phone. You could share your commute information with your friend, and they can monitor your movement and alert first responders in case you have an emergency situation. So before I leave my safe space, I'm going to think about my commute. Hopefully before I even decide to work late or study late, I'm thinking about, okay, so there will be a point in time where I have to leave this safe space and commute to the subway. What are my concerns? The time of day. Am I going to cut through areas where it's not heavily trafficked, if there's not a large pedestrian presence? Or am I going to take the long route where there's better lighting and more people? I will always recommend take the long route. It's better exercise, 1. 2, there's safety in numbers. Oftentimes, folks aren't targeted in well-lit areas, right? And folks are less likely to get targeted if there's bystanders nearby. So before you commute to the subway, what are your safety concerns? What are your vulnerabilities? Do you have a laptop? Do you have a computer that you have to bring home with you? Or can you leave it in your locker? Can you leave it in your office space? And why would that even be something to think about? Well, having something valuable on your person could give motivation to want to remove that property from you. Any information about hazardous conditions or criminal activity in and around the area? Have you checked the crime alerts? Have you been online to check to see what's going on in and around the communities where you work or live? What do you know about what's going on in the area in which you're getting ready to commute through? What route would you take? Would you take the direct route that's well lit, heavily trafficked, or will you try to get a shortcut? It's not worth it. If you want to try to reduce the amount of time commuting from A to B, have that part of the plan. Make sure that before you go past that deadline where you have to leave, give yourself some padded, some margin in order to get to where you need to go in time. This way, you're not tempted to cut through take any shortcuts. And would you avoid standing near people once you get to the subway? Some folks feel comfortable being by themselves, isolated at the far end of the platform. That might be fine early in the morning, but late at night, I wouldn't recommend that. There's safety in numbers. And from the input that the Grayson and Stein piece gave, the respondents really said that they were less likely to target folks who were in a crowd. Folks who are by themselves, isolated, that provided more of an opportunity to them than if that person was in and around a crowd. So there's safety in numbers. Don't go out of your way to avoid people, especially late at night. You don't have to interact with anyone you don't wish to interact with, but being in and around people actually increases your level of safety. And what subway car would you get into? I think a lot of folks, especially native New Yorkers, would always recommend to their loved ones that late at night, make sure you get into the car where the conductor is located. Well, how do you even know what car the conductor is located, right? It's like a crapshoot. But did you know that you can quickly identify the exact car where the train conductor is located by looking for these indicator boards? So halfway down every subway platform in New York City, there's a black and white striped bar of wood that is lined up with the conductor's window. So as a train moves into the platform, all the conductors must lower their window and point at this indicator board. This alerts MTA dispatch that the conductor is actually alert, not sleeping, and aware. All platforms in New York City have these indicator boards. So if you're having to commute late at night and you have to use the subway, you have to get onto the platform. If you want to line yourself up exactly where the conductor will be, find the indicator board. It's present at every station. And if you have to take the subway today, test it out. Try to find the indicator board at your local station. At 116th Street going uptown, it's in between 115th Street and 116th Street. It's very easy to identify. And if you want to make a game out of it, if you stand right there by the indicator board as the conductor pulls in, give them a wave, let them know that you acknowledge them, and you'll probably get a smile in return. Okay, so moving into this next segment, we're going to discuss active shooter, active threat. This video is focused on run, hide, fight. And I like to let everyone know that there's going to be some stress-inducing moments in this video. There's going to be simulated act of violence. So this is my trigger warning. So please feel free to step outside at any time if you feel any anxiety or any stress because of the video. It won't hurt my feelings. All right.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you are ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
So one thing to take into consideration is that an active threat, active shooter event is just one variable on the situational awareness continuum. That is just one example of what could be potentially hazardous or threatening to our survival. But given, to give it proper attention, some things that you might want to do, especially in the workplace or in the classroom, know what doors lock from the inside. Have these sanctuaries already mapped out. Know your exits. If you think about this, if you could close your eyes and mentally navigate through your workspace or your class space, how would you navigate from your classroom or workspace out to the hallway, to the stairwell, to get yourself to safety? Have you identified areas within your workspace or your class space that you could shelter in place? Knowing what doors open inward versus outward, and why would that be important? Well, doors that open inward, you can barricade those from the inside. Doors that open outwardly, well, you can't barricade those doors. So having this visualization, that this schematic laid out in your mind, you can actually have these sanctuaries set up. You can actually have escape routes planned out, and have these conversations with your colleagues. I take a lot of value in the course evaluations you all be receiving. In our earlier session this morning, one of the attendees had asked, what happens if In an active shooter event, a person has a disability. What if they can't move? What if they're elderly? Well, you have to take that into consideration when you're conducting your personal risk assessment, when you're developing your survival playbook. If you know that it might take you longer to get away from an active threat, active shooter situation, one of the most valuable things that you can do is identify an area in your workspace or your class space where you can shelter in place. Most of our classrooms here at Columbia have door locks where you can engage the lock on the side of the door, or they have the deadbolts on the inside. If you want us to come out and do an assessment of your workspace or your class space, I'll give you my contact information. This is something that we love to be able to help our community navigate, and it alleviates a lot of stress. So in this particular example of run, hide, fight, the active threat, active shooter, how you would respond to a situation like that is you would run from the threat. If you can't run from the threat, you hide from the threat. And if you have no other recourse, if your back is up against the wall, and if it is a matter of life or death, then the recommendation is to fight. Having a plan laid out, especially at the workplace, when you can collaborate with colleagues and devise, okay, so in this given situation, this is how we would respond. If there's a deviation from our normal, if there's any red flags, who makes the call to public safety? Some colleagues actually devise a plan. They may alert another colleague to get the silver folder or give Gene a call. And that would indicate that there is a situation that requires a public safety response. Having this already worked out, identifying where your sanctuaries are, knowing what your own personal capabilities are. How do you feel if you go up a flight of stairs? If you're totally exhausted and winded, well, running away from an active threat, active shooter event might cause you a lot of harm. So hide. Where can you shelter in place? Where's your sanctuary going to be? And having that already laid out and determined, if the what if hypothetical presents itself to you, you'll be able to navigate through that situation more effectively. So some tips and additional training: always take ownership of your personal safety. Our environment, our community is the safety and well-being of our community is a shared responsibility. We take this very seriously. Your feelings, your concerns are always welcomed. Any input that you have, if you have any interactions that you perceive to be negative, report those situations to public safety so we can monitor these things. If you're walking home at night and you notice that the lighting conditions aren't quite right, maybe a light bulb needs to be changed, give us a call and we'll make sure that the facilities folks are notified so we can address that issue immediately. Knowing that you have so many different resources at your disposal helps you navigate some of these situations more effectively with less anxiety, and knowing that you have such a high level of community support. As a member of the community, it makes me feel so good being here, knowing that the support that we have is just second to none. But we all have to take ownership of our own personal safety. We all must plan and prepare for those hypothetical what if situations. You can't wait until the moment it happens to try to navigate through it. You have to think about this before it happens, because if you wait until the event happens, then you're going to be a deer in headlights. You're going to be paralyzed. Going through these hypotheticals, visualizing them, will help prepare you to navigate through those situations effectively. Always be aware of your surroundings, the locations of exits, doorways. When you're at home with your loved ones, practice this with your family. Give them a scenario. What if you wake up and you can't see because the room is enveloped in smoke? Well, when there's smoke, there's fire. That's the assumption. If you can't see, how do you navigate from your bedroom through your living space out to safety? Practice that with your loved ones. Think about that when it comes to your office space. If the power went out, if there was no lights, could you effectively navigate in the blind, in the dark, through your workspace to safety? When you pay attention to the exits, the layout of your workspace, of your class space, it just gives you more confidence. And when the what if hypothetical situation presents itself, your response is just rote. It's just automatic. It's part of that unconscious response. Always report suspicious persons or activity to public safety, or if you're not on campus, call 911, especially in those moments where you feel uncomfortable, when that intuition that you have is just, okay, you feel like a threat to your safety or survival is imminent. Don't hesitate. Utilize the tools that we have at our disposal, our resources, that LionSafe app, that friend walk feature. If something happens during your commute, knowing that someone's there watching over me and can alert first responders to my exact location, that's such a great way to alleviate a lot of stress or anxiety. This is our email address if you're interested in additional public safety training, ps-training@columbia.edu. We try to respond to all inquiries. If you have a question, if you want to get on the phone and just work through some hypothetical situations, this is something I've been doing for a very long time. And I've already seen in my life the benefit of having planning and preparation, having folks take this seriously, because, with over 20 years experience in this field, I've actually been exposed to some incidents, and seeing folks, survive life-threatening situations is just, it's paying it forward. So I don't mind taking the time and having these conversations with you, and we're always responsive. This email goes directly to our training team, so all the members within the training team will get the email, and we'll be able to respond to you quickly. So Homeland Security provides free online training. There's one module that I would highly recommend titled "You Are the Help Until Help Arrives." The course description is: life-threatening emergencies can happen fast, and emergency responders aren't always nearby. You may be able to save a life by taking actions immediately. And what comes to my mind immediately is Las Vegas. Folks who are out enjoying themselves at a concert, and all of a sudden their wonderful evening is disrupted by just a mass casualty event. At that moment in time, there was just not enough ambulances in the city of Las Vegas to handle the casualties, and citizens actually had to act. A lot of folks, their lives were saved because citizens were able to provide first response care, first aid, and actually transport to hospitals. So this training video, it's free. If you're interested in it, let me know. Just send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's a great training tool. Okay, so at this time, if y'all have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation. Just open up the floor for questions. Please throw me curveballs, fastballs. If there's a question that y'all ask that I can't answer, I promise you that I will find the answer to that question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Elizabeth, yes.
Okay, great. I'm an adjunct professor, Matt, and I just want a couple questions. One, what happens if the only route to a subway station is at a time of day that there aren't a lot of people around, and lighting conditions are just so, but you work late, and that's what's there. And what would you suggest? And
my first recommendation is, especially if you're on campus, Manhattanville and Morningside have the Via Rideshare program. You can get direct rideshare service at Morningside and Manhattanville. I'm told that service is hopefully is going to be extended to the medical center, but that's one solution. The other one is just calling public safety and letting them know, well, this is who I am, this is where I am working late, I'm by myself, and we could actually provide you with a lift to the train station. The LionSafe App friend walk feature is also another one, knowing that you have somebody there who's actively monitoring your commute. That might help alleviate some stress. And also, collaborate with colleagues. If you're going to be working late, and if you have other colleagues who are going to be working late, maybe you can come together and decide that, well, okay, let's leave at this time together, and we can walk with one another to the train station. That also is helpful. But if you're walking from your residence, so I live in the Bronx, And I know that it takes me about a quarter mile to get from my apartment to the train station. And there's some times when I have to get to work really early, and there's sometimes I have to leave work really late. So I always find myself in that situation. But being aware of your environment, knowing the folks who live in and around your neighborhood and going through the personal risk assessment actually gets you conscious, and your actions are intentional. It's a great way to counter any bias you might have by actively thinking about what's going on in your neighborhood. And oftentimes the threats are invalidated because you've taken those steps. Okay, so here's a bodega that's open 24/7. I know that there's certain areas where I can go and shelter into place. And that might be one recommendation I have for you is if you're commuting, if you're having to leave from home early or leaving work at night and you're on Columbia or in and around Columbia property, are safe havens. We have a lot of 24-hour stores. Just knowing where you can seek refuge, have some sanctuary. I love that LionSafe app because you can communicate directly with the Public Safety Operations Center by just pressing a button. And we have such a presence in our community that a response should be no more than a couple of minutes. And if you're planning on leaving the office late, just giving them a call, letting them know these are the facts. I was into my work, lost track of time, and I just don't feel comfortable walking to the train station. We don't say no to anybody. So you ask for a lift, and I'm pretty sure we're going to come through.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I hope that I was able to answer your question, Elizabeth, and provide you a little bit of identify some more resources that you have.
Okay, the one last thing that it's like a lot of the subways, you got to walk down a set of stairs or two before you are on one of the platforms before you even go further down. And so sometimes, there are situations that you won't know until you actually go down that first or second flight of stairs. What are your advice in those situations?
Well, always be cognizant of your personal space. Not every person out in the world is there to harm us. And going through our personal risk assessment really allows you to work through what is actually a threat and what is not, and move past that. As you're walking down the stairs, scanning ahead, giving enough distance. And if you're uncomfortable in the amount of space you're given, maybe wait on top of the platform until the train actually pulls into the station. I know at the 116th station there by Columbia, you got to walk down one has to walk down the flight of steps in order to get on the platform, but at least you have an escape route. Also at the 116th Street, you have a way to get back up onto Broadway at the 115th if you're going uptown, and little things like that. One thing that comes to mind, Elizabeth, is at the 168th subway station, you have options, elevator options. There's going to be one elevator where there's going to be an MTA employee manning that particular elevator. And it might be a little extra time, but if it means alleviating a lot of stress and anxiety, wait for that occupied elevator, the MTA occupied elevator to come around. That might be very helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
Matt, it looks like we have one question in chat, and then I know Sia has a question. So the question in chat is from CG. I'd love public safety to share any reading lists they might have. I found some of the principles in The Gift of Fear to be useful, even if it's a little dated in the tone.
Wonderful. I can compile. That's one thing I really enjoy. That's as a Columbia alum, I got exposed to reading a lot, and it's just one of those things. The better prepared you are, the better you off when those situations come to mind. As far as safety, personal safety planning, I can put together a reading list that I think y'all might enjoy. Some contemporary, and then some historical. The Grayson and Stein article, their research was very informative, and I think there's been a lot of research that parodied it as the years have gone on. But there's a lot of interesting information that I can provide you if you just send me ps-training@columbia.edu. Just say, Matt, share with me your reading list. I'll send you my reading list. Okay. Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you, Carol.
Sia, you can ask your question now. Thanks.
I was wondering what you recommend carrying: a whistle, pepper spray, mace, taser, knife. I have heard of people carrying baseball bats, umbrellas. What do you recommend carrying in terms of self-defense tools?
Well, always think about what situation you're being exposed to on that continuum, right? One example, the active threat, active shooter. Improvised defensive tools, offensive weapons, things that you can employ to protect your life. That might be useful for that particular event, that specific scenario. When it comes to my normal routine, personally, I'll share this with you. I'm not into violence. I actively recommend nonviolent crisis intervention. The path of least resistance is avoidance, but not avoidance, but not acknowledging what's happening, but not putting myself in a situation where I can be harmed. And the thing to take into consideration when you're actually carrying things that could be weapons, pepper spray, taser, gun, knife, there's always consequences. And one statistic I hate citing, but it's just a reality. Most officers who are killed in the line of duty via firearms are often shot with their own weapons. And we're talking about a group of folks who receive an enormous amount of weapons training and retention training. Having something that is on my person that could potentially be turned on me and harm me, I don't recommend anyone carrying a weapon. A taser, once again, what if that gets taken from me and used against me? Now in the Grayson Stein study and some subsequent studies that follow the same line of research, a lot of the respondents recommend that a whistle actually would be a good idea. That is a loud noise and will alert passerbys to something out of the norm. Yeah, I'd recommend that. And that might be something that you can easily carry on your person. I had a North Face backpack at one time that actually had a whistle as part of that backpack. I thought that was really interesting. But if you're just scrolling through Amazon and you find something that serves that purpose, a whistle is a good recommendation. As far as pepper spray, some of the respondents in these studies say, well, you know what, that could be a deterrent. But how often are you carrying that pepper spray? How often do you have it at the ready when that what if situation presents itself? So if you have to go rummaging through your bag or your backpack for pepper spray, it really doesn't serve the purpose that it was intended to serve. And also, some of the information that we get from these respondents is when folks are compliant, these situations happen in seconds, not minutes, not hours. They happen so briefly. They expect compliance. And through compliance, that's the path of least resistance. It's an awful experience. Nobody wishes to be in a situation like that. But there's nothing that we own worth more than our lives. And never put yourself in a situation where you can be harmed like that. Having weapons on our person, how much training does one receive? Self-defense, getting caught off guard. I really would dissuade anyone from trying to fight an attacker, unless you're in a very specific situation, like an active threat, active shooter, where your only options are run, hide, fight. But the preparation and planning, having folks involved, that LionSafe app is a really good tool with the friend walk. Safety in numbers when you're planning outings. I'm guilty of this, going solo by myself often, but if I had somebody else with me, I think my comfort level would be my anxiety levels would be much lower, and I feel much safer. So if you can plan your events or your outings where you have folks with you, that support group, safety in numbers, I think that would be really an effective strategy. As far as having weapons or pepper spray, tasers, knives, any violent weapons, we're all accountable for our actions. And I think I mentioned this in our last session. In New York State, we as citizens, or we're all citizens here, even all of our public safety members are non-sworn citizens. In New York State, we as citizens may lawfully use force against another to protect ourselves or protect another person. But the amount of force that we use has to be reasonable and necessary, where anybody else in that same situation would have done exactly what you would have done. And when you don't have the training on how to defend yourself or how to deploy these protective tools, sometimes you might actually escalate a situation where compliance, giving the person what they're asking for, that would have been the easiest, most effective way to de-escalate and end the encounter. Whereas, pulling out a weapon or pepper spray, that might actually, a lot of these respondents in these studies said, well, that often, that sort of response from the target, there was reprisal, there was a violent reprisal. And I would never recommend somebody put themselves in a situation where they can get hurt. I just know that more often than not, compliance is the best path to getting through a situation effectively and safely. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you, Matt. Looks like we have 5 more minutes, so I think we have enough time for the 3 questions I see. I'll read the question in chat, and then Dwali, if you want to go, and then Ellen can go after. So Mariko asked, one thing that has made me anxious with the recent anti-Asian hate crime is that people that don't seem to show any irregular behavior may suddenly attack violently. Is there anything that we can do to minimize these encounters or risks if visual cues are not enough?
Well, there's always safety, and that's one of my strongest recommendations, safety in number. Don't, putting your, being alone, and this is something that, in practice, it's easier to say than actually employ. But just knowing that there's so many resources now at our disposal, these random acts, you can control what's going on in your own mind. You can control your route of travel. There's a lot of things we can't control. We can control the distance that we give between ourselves and someone we don't know. Always being cognizant of our personal space is one good first step. When somebody encroaches into our personal space, once they get even closer, we don't have to continue forward. The lovely thing is, like, we can actually take steps back. And depending on where you are, your actual location, if you're in and around businesses, going into a business and informing the folks in the business that I feel very uncomfortable, this is what I've just experienced. Can somebody call 911? Can somebody call public safety for me? That Friend Walk app feature within the LionSafe app is also a nice one. You can have a friend alert first responders to your situation, your exact location. Just being aware, not distracted, giving yourself enough distance, which means more time to respond to something that is potentially hazardous or threatening. So that would be my first advice. Planning your route, planning how you travel about. Try not to travel alone. There is safety in numbers. Take advantage of the resources that you have at your disposal, especially in and around the Columbia community. We have so many safe havens in and around where you can duck into any one of these safe haven stores and get help immediately. Having somebody accost you or verbally insult you, having that incident reported is very important. These training sessions, what they're doing is it's just making aware that this is real. We have folks in our community who feel unsafe, and bringing awareness to this issue really, makes more and more folks aware and more likely to report these things that they observe, and which I think is going to be a plus and help alleviate a lot of the anxiety, the stress that our community has right now. These attacks, they're awful. And I think with more of these trainings and just an open, frank discussion, acknowledging that this is actually an occurrence and that we have to stand in solidarity with one another and provide support, I think that as a community, we can get through these things effectively.
Thank you. Dwali, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for doing this for so many of us. I was curious, when people are suddenly verbally attacked, or that there's some form of hate communication or hate language, obviously walking away is advised, but sometimes emotions and things kind of freeze you and kind of sort of stop you from reacting. And so sometimes you don't always have controls when you're sort of frightened or something happens to you. And in those moments, I just wonder what you think is sort of an appropriate response, or like, what do you do after that moment where you are done being paralyzed or something, because most of us, regardless of race, we don't expect to hear something so evil. And when you hear it, you could end up just feeling like you can't move, you can't breathe, something's happening. And I just wonder what you might suggest once sort of you finish getting unparalyzed or something.
Yeah. This was one shock to my system when I first moved to New York, is how quickly native New Yorkers are to let you know that if you're looking at them a certain way, it causes them to, I mean, they're really quick to tell you their feelings, right? Very quick to, lash out verbally. I took a while for me to get used to that. But when it comes to this sort of these communications that are focused on race or ethnicity that are obviously bias motivated, not trying to duck away from the issue at hand. This is somebody who just exposed you to something that was bias motivated. Planning and preparation, getting your mindset on that hypothetical, that what if scenario, that if this is something that you were exposed to, how would you work through it? Well, Matt says that one should not immediately respond, right? Path of least resistance, because even though your initial reaction is to lash out and maybe let that person know how you really feel, but the facts are, especially when it's an attack on one's race or ethnicity, knowing what it is, and it needs to be reported, right? So that's a bias motivated incident. You have resources at your disposal. Instead of confronting the individual, being the best witness that you can be. This is where it happened. This is the time it happened. This is the description of the person who verbally abused me, berated me. This is the person, and that gets passed on to our investigative team, and they'll be able to identify, hopefully, especially within the Columbia area. Our cameras are phenomenal, and we share those resources with our partners within the community, Teachers College, Barnard, JTS, UTS. And these incidents that occur, the reporting of it helps us place our personnel in areas to, especially areas where these incidents have occurred, because oftentimes that could be a deterrent. I would never recommend immediately confronting somebody who is verbally assaulting you like that. You just don't want to escalate a situation. Nothing in this world is worth getting you hurt, right? Causing you harm. And if someone is willing to say something so egregiously, so offensive, then what are they also capable? What else are they capable of doing? So don't put yourself, I would strongly recommend not putting yourself in a situation where somebody could physically harm you. If the path of least resistance is just being the best observer, the best reporter that you can be, and when you're safely away from that person, reporting what had just happened to public safety, allow us to respond and address the situation. Allow us to bring in the authorities, since oftentimes this is specific. If it's a bias motivated, if it's motivated by bias, then this is something where we can actually bring in more resources to address. But first and foremost, it's an awful situation to be subjected to. But don't put yourself in a moment where you can actually escalate things, when all you have to do is just walk past it, report it, and let us handle that for you. And then we can always follow up with you, and you can as far as the status and where things are. I know everyone's initial reaction is to get an immediate response because of the way it made you feel. But knowing how you feel in moments like that will help you better prepare for that what if it ever comes to light, right? This is how I would respond to this sort of beratement. Okay, so that is it. Okay, so I need to work past that. All right, instead of responding this way, the path of least resistance, following this path of de-escalation, putting myself in the most advantageous, safe situation is just to move past it. And via the LionSafe, I'm really promoting this LionSafe app, but if you just access the app and call, say if you're at the Morningside campus, public safety operations, you can report this immediately and we can address that as quickly as we can. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, I think we're going to stop there. And then any other questions that you all have, you can reach out to Matt, you can reach out to myself. I will put the email back in the chat so you guys can see it. And if you have any questions, please email us.
And in closing, I really like to thank all y'all for your engagement. It's such a wonderful questions. I love these difficult hypotheticals because this is how we actually better prepare ourselves for those what ifs. And in continuation, if you're ever interested in chatting about those what if situations, you can always reach out to us at ps-training@columbia.edu. And those course evaluations that Caroline will be sending y'all, whatever feedback, input, recommendation that you have is greatly appreciated. And I really want to thank you all for your time today. It's been a pleasure.